All right. Welcome back to WTF Menopause and a special Christmas edition. We're going to come to you today at Christmas Day. Hopefully, you're having a wonderful day and enjoying the family, and maybe even getting this the day after so that you're spending that time with family. But we wanted to make sure that we got our information out and we didn't wait too long. So, I am here with Michelle. Thank you so much for joining me on this special day, Michelle.
Oh, you're welcome.
I'm really excited to talk to you. You have a lot of background and a lot of really interesting things, and we're going to talk about aromatherapy in particular, and I'm really very interested in this topic. So this is going to be a really fun conversation today, I think. So Michelle is a licensed massage therapist, an aromatherapist, and a Reiki master, and she specializes with PMS and hormone-related symptoms, including menopause, with her aromatherapy. So this is going to be a really cool show, I think. So before we get started into the aromatherapy aspect, though, Michelle, would you give me a little bit of background on your experience with menopause?
Well, I've been in perimenopause for about 10 years now. So
Oh,
hip, hip,
wow.
hooray. It's not done yet. Um,
That's a long time for Perry, though, I think.
it is.
Yeah.
It's about the everything I've seen is like 3 to 10 years. So
Okay.
kind of at the max end of normal still. I'm at the high end of normal. But
Oh, goodness.
and there's only, honestly, it's not been for me very bad. I
Okay.
never had bad periods. I never had cramps. I never had PMS. I've had PMS 3 times in my life, and that's been since I've been in perimenopause,
Oh,
and really
wow.
only in the last 5 years. So the first time really was WTF. I was like, what is happening to me? This is not me. I don't even know what's going on.
Oh,
Um,
my.
and then the next day I'm like, oh, I know what that was. My thing was, the biggest thing that I had for a couple of years was night sweats.
Mm,
That was the worst thing for me.
mm-hmm.
Um, I'll get an occasional now activity related hot flash if I really exert myself.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be like, I'm hotter than I should be.
Yeah.
But really, I'm one of the lucky ones, and I know
Mm-hmm.
that,
Yeah.
and
Sounds
I'm
like
very
it.
grateful. Yeah, I'm very
Especially, well,
grateful for that.
if you're going to go through it for 10 years, at least that you're not going through a really, significantly heavy
Right,
amount of symptoms, because that could be really, 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 really trying if you go for that long.
right.
So what have you found that's helped you with your night sweats when you had them, or some of the other your PMS when you did have it? Have you found anything that's helped you out?
For me, they were the PMS things. Like I said, it's only happened 3 times, and I had
Yeah.
zero warning it was going to happen. So and the first time I'd never had it. So, um, so I haven't dealt with that with me,
Mm-hmm.
because they're weird little one-offs, the three
Yeah.
times that it happened. Um, the night sweats I found, I kept a bottle of peppermint essential oil by my bed,
Mm-hmm.
and that helps to cool me down pretty quick.
Yep.
But peppermint menthol attaches to cold receptors in the body, which is why it feels cold when you apply
Mm.
it. So, um,
Yes.
I I have applied it neat to myself, but
Mm.
I always tell my clients to dilute it,
Yeah.
because some people have a little irritation with it. It can be a little strong.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but well, we don't always take our own advice.
Right. Right.
But right.
I've done the same thing with the peppermint. That's saved my life. I used to have hives really, really bad
Hmm.
about 15 years ago, and I've still occasionally get them, but for a long time I had them for a lot, like a good portion of my body. And that was
Hmm.
the only thing that was saving my skin, literally, because
Right.
none of the medication that it was prescribed to me would actually reduce the pain and the inflammation and the swelling. And so peppermint oil was literally a lifesaver for me. So,
Right. And in acute case, in acute treatments, it's okay to use essential oils neat on the body
mm-hmm.
generally. Um, and honestly, when you wake up in the middle of the night with a hot flash, unless it's already pre-mixed, are you gonna take the time No,
No.
you're not. I mean, let's be real talk here, right?
Right, right. Exactly. Exactly. Well, so let's dive into aromatherapy.
Mhm.
And so you're a certified aromatherapist, right?
Right.
And what does that entail? How do you get to become a certified
Okay.
aromatherapist?
So things are a little different now than they were when I became a certified aromatherapist.
Okay.
So back then it was 40 hours of from an NAH approved school, and NAHA is the National Association of Holistic Aromatherapy.
Okay.
They used to be the only game in town as far as credentialing.
Mm,
All credentials for aromatherapy are voluntary.
okay.
There's no licensing in any state. There's no federal anything, no guidelines even.
Oh.
Um, there are a couple of aromatherapy associations now in the states as well. I think one, as well as the NAHA. But as long as you're following one of those two guidelines,
Mm-hmm.
and since I know the NAHA, that's what I've gone with. So back then it was 40 hours. You had to do 5 case studies. You had to take an in-depth test on everything you learned. You had to learn about 20 essential oils, the chemistry of them,
Mm.
how essential oils are extracted, other types of things like absolutes and CO2 extracts and stuff like that, how they're produced, because they're all different. You don't really want to be putting an absolute on your body because they're solvent extracted.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Occasionally, you can get an absolute that's an enfleurage, which means it was extracted in fat.
Okay. Yeah.
But
So there's different ways to
they're
get the
going to be
essential oil.
expensive. They're going to be
Yeah.
very expensive
Yeah.
because that's a really time and labor intensive process. The enfleurage is.
Okay.
Um, so
So,
so now it's 50 hours. All the rest of the stuff is the same,
okay.
and that's for certified level 1.
Mm.
So back then there was certified and there was registered, and registered was like 300 or 400 hours
Oh, wow.
or 40 hours. You know, I
Right.
think they
That's a
might have had
huge
like I
difference.
think they might have had like an advanced aromatherapist sort of credential, and they took that out, and now they have certified level 1, certified professional, and clinical aromatherapist.
Okay.
And so um, now it's like I said, certified level 1 is 50 hours. Same thing, 20 oils, all the other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, 5 case studies. For the professional, it's 300 hours. I'm sorry, 200 hours, which is 150 on top of the
Mm-hmm.
50. So
Mm-hmm.
it's an additional 150 hours. Um, it's 40 oils, so 20 more oils,
Okay.
5 more case studies, and again, another test.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then for clinical, it's another 100 hours after that, over that,
Wow.
and another 10 case studies, um, and a paper on like a 10 or 15 page paper on one thing,
Mm-hmm.
one aspect of aromatherapy or one aspect of aromatherapy treatment.
Mm-hmm.
So um, and they all have chemistry components you have to know. You have to take some chemistry, anatomy and physiology.
Mm.
um, for the clinical, you actually have to have a, a master's level pathology,
Oh.
which a lot of the aromatherapy schools offer, because
Mm-hmm.
you can't just go take a master's level pathology class if you don't have
If you're not admitted to
if you
another
don't have the right
school and all
specs,
that. Yeah.
right?
Right.
So,
Right.
so they have ways to get that information, but it's in
Mm-hmm.
addition to those core hours.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So,
Yeah.
um, so it sounds like from what you were saying that there's different ways to extract the oil. You
Yes,
had the fat, and then you said the solvent, and
right.
then
And those
what
will both
else?
produce an absolute.
Okay.
Essential oils, by definition, are either extracted by steam distillation
Okay.
or, or by expression. And so expression is generally reserved for the citrus oils because the
Mm.
citrus oils come from the rind of the
Right.
citrus fruit.
Right.
So you press the rind, you get the essential oil out.
Mm-hmm.
All the rest of them are steam distilled.
Okay. Okay.
There are a few essential oils that you will find. Roses, probably the one people are most familiar with, that you can get either rose essential oil or rose absolute.
Okay.
And they smell very different
I would imagine it.
because they're
Yeah.
extracted differently.
Right.
And, but no matter which of those you get, they're going to be very expensive because rose doesn't have very much essential oil in each petal.
Mm-hmm.
So it takes, gosh, I want to like 1,000 pounds of rose petals to make like an ounce of essential oil. It's insane.
Yeah. I've
And
heard that there's a lot
yeah,
of rose petals to get
yeah.
that. Yeah. So do you consider, or is, I guess, I don't know if this is an opinion or if it's a more of a fact, is aromatherapy more of a science or is it more of an art?
Um, really it's both.
Okay.
You have to know the chemistry. And I know I've had arguments with people who have said, you only need chemistry if it's chemicals. Honey, it's chemicals.
Yeah, it seems like,
Phenol is phenol, whether the plant produced it or somebody produced it in a lab.
right,
If it's called phenol, the molecular structure is the same. It is the
right,
same thing.
right.
We generally call them phytochemicals when they come from a plant,
Mm,
because phyto means plant.
mm-hmm,
But and I use the analogy of like in our birth control and hormone replacement, they don't give us estrogen, they give us estrogen replacement, which is
mm-hmm.
different because if you actually look at your prescription bottle, it'll say estriol, estradiol, or estrone, some type
Right.
of combination of those,
Mm-hmm.
because the molecular structure is different to estrogen. They
Right.
attach to the estrogen receptors and they have a similar function, but not an identical function.
Right.
So they don't act identically, um, and so they're not called estrogen
Right. Right.
because the molecular structure is different.
Yeah.
So you have to know that. The more you know about the chemistry, and there are
Mm-hmm.
only certain things you need to know. You don't have to have, a bachelor's in chemistry, but you do have to understand ketones and aldehydes and all of that sort of thing, terpenes and sesquiterpenes and monoterpenes, and how they act in the body in order to know which oils are going to be best for yourself or your client.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but when it comes to blending a a really nice smelling blend, whether it's for simply an emotional, you know, oh, you want somebody's going through a hard time, they're grieving, here's a great one, because you're not applying it to the body.
Mm-hmm.
Um, to make those really nice smelling blends, that is an art.
Mm-hmm.
There's really an art to that. Um, a little science can come into it, but really it's an art.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really both.
Yeah. Sounds like it. And
Yeah,
it makes sense because, when you think about the molecular structure of anything, right,
mhm,
there's chemistry involved no matter what.
exactly.
And there is something to be said for what you inhale too, that
Mhm.
affects your brain and it affects your body and it
Yep.
affects all that stuff. So there's a lot more to just, oh, it smells pretty or it smells relaxing or whatever. There's an
Right.
actual physical reaction there going on. So
Right.
it makes sense that you need to know a little bit more than just, oh, hey, it smells great.
Right. And that's why when people say, well, I have this lavender stuff from the store at the mall,
Yeah.
and that doesn't
Yeah.
help me sleep. And I'm like, but is that essential oil or is it a fragrance? Or sometimes they'll call it an essence oil, which
Right.
is not the same thing. That's their way of trying to trick you into thinking that it's an essential oil.
Sure.
You know,
Sure.
it smells nice, but it's not
Mhm.
going to have the same effect on you
Right.
because the
Right.
molecules are different.
Yeah, for sure. And which would make sense because
Uh-oh.
then it's not going to have the same response in your body.
I'm sorry, I missed that. We had an internet connection issue there.
Oh, I said it would make sense to for the lavender or whatever not to have the same reaction because because of it being a different molecule, then
Right,
therefore it makes sense that you're not going to have that same response.
right.
Excuse me. So, um, jumping into the menopause,
Yeah.
how do you treat menopause with aromatherapy then?
Well, it really depends. It's I kind of use it's called a biopsychosocial approach, which is what they use in pain science now.
Okay.
But because there's the biological stuff, but there's
Mm-hmm.
also the psychological stuff. How do you feel about what's happening to you? Is it
Exactly.
really distressing, or you're just like, well, that's part of it, so whatever, I'll get through it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then the
That's
social part,
huge.
it is huge. And
Yeah.
then the social part is, do you have a support system? You know,
Mm-hmm.
are all of your friends are all the females that you know, or any person that you know who is going through or has gone through menopause, pardon my French, bitchy about it,
Yeah.
whiny, complaining about it, you're not going to have much support.
Right.
Um, so
I've even heard of, and fortunately I don't I don't have this, but a lot of partners who don't believe or don't understand or aren't patient or
yes,
all those things. That support
all
system
those that support system is important too.
is huge important.
Yeah. So, and then you take that along with what are all of your symptoms? What are the
Mm-hmm.
symptoms you really want to address? You try not to address more than 2 to 3 at a time, because you just end up with soup. I mean,
Well,
you just end up with an essential oil soup, and you're not really addressing any one thing enough.
right, right,
So we try to address um, the things that are most bothersome first and work our
right.
way down.
Yeah.
But then, there are things that we have to be aware of. I have a long intake with anybody that I'm going to be doing aromatherapy with.
Mm-hmm.
And I have somebody who desperately wants it but doesn't want to fill out the intake, and I'm like, well, sorry then.
So what
Um,
does that intake cover? Like
it covers
contraindications or anything?
a lot of contraindications.
Mm-hmm.
How sensitive? Do you have sensitive skin? Um, do you have issues with your liver? Do you have issues with your kidneys? Do you have a family history of kidney disease? Family history
Mm.
of liver disease? Um, Anybody who has either a history of or a family history of estrogenic cancers, because there are a few essential oils that are estrogen mimics, which
Mm.
most of them are not. Lavender is not. It will not feminize your boys. I get so tired of hearing that one. But there are a few that are estrogen mimics, and you want to totally avoid if there's any possibility,
Mm-hmm.
if there's any history. Um, but like sometimes somebody will have, their big thing is their hot flashes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but fennel is great for hot flashes.
It is.
Fennel is a good one. Some people don't like peppermint; it's too strong or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But fennel is great also if you have scanty periods. So if you have hot flashes and heavy periods, you really want to avoid fennel.
Okay.
So you need to. So I ask some fairly personal questions.
Mm-hmm.
How's your average flow? How long how long are your periods?
Mm-hmm.
Are are they um, are they pretty um, are they cyclical? Like, are they
Oh,
pretty on
consistent.
time,
Yeah.
consistent, or are they kind of, hey, it gets here when it gets here?
Erratic.
um, because that all of those things go into that decision of which oils I'm going to even consider using.
Okay.
So
Okay.
you can't just look at a list of essential oils and say, oh, well, this one's good for hot flashes. Try this.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, there's the intake is it's really long, and it'll change a little bit. I'll ask additional questions based on what some of their answers are.
Sure. Sure. So you said that fennel is an interesting one for hot flashes. Peppermint oil, I'm assuming also.
Right.
Um, what about low libido? Is there something for that? Because oh my goodness, isn't that something that we all have to deal with? It. Most of us, some of us are blessed to not have that. They go
Right.
the opposite direction.
Right.
Um, some of us had that for a few years, and now they're on the other side of it. Now
Right.
we're in the
Exactly.
low side.
Right. So that's another one where I have to ask them then, tell me what you mean by low libido. How does
Mm,
that look for you? How is that different from before? Is
right,
it different from before, or is this your normal?
right.
Is it stress related? because you could have a stress-related low libido, in which case using one of the hormonal oils isn't going to help you. You need a
Right.
stress oil.
Right.
Is it a lack of intimacy? Like, do you not feel a sense of intimacy? There are oils that can help that,
Mm-hmm.
but other ones aren't going to help that sense of intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to, I pretty much,
Really
when it
dig
comes to
in.
aromatherapy, the answer to every question is it depends, which drives some people crazy.
Sure. Well, when you want an answer, I mean, when you're trying to find
Right,
something, anything that will work
right,
for whether it be hot flashes or libido or any of that stuff, people are
right,
really, I think many of us are just give me something. Cause there's so many other things going on in the day that you're just like,
right,
I have to do one more thing.
right.
But
No,
I do understand that you don't want to just grab the first thing and run with it, because you could have some issues and it could make things more difficult if you are grabbing fennel and you're already having a heavy flow. Then that could be bad, sounds like.
exactly. Yeah. So, when people talk about libido, the first ones I think of are
Hmm.
ylang ylang,
Okay.
um, rose, which really is more indicated for frigidity, but some people just love the smell of rose, and so
Mm.
that can soften them a little bit, um, even if they're not technically frigid.
Mm.
That can help. Um, Lavender, Pacific sandalwood, geranium, juniper berry, neroli,
Mm.
especially if
Mm.
it's a stress related. Um, let's see, bitter orange, jasmine.
I love
Um,
jasmine. Oh,
oh, yeah,
that smell.
yeah. I would like jasmine to be less expensive,
Oh, sure.
but but other than that, I
Right.
would use it more.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
But yeah, those are the ones um, that I that I kind of think of first
Yeah.
when somebody brings up low libido.
Yeah. Well, they all sound, most of them. I have some experience with oils, and so they sound like they are, the ones that I'm familiar with definitely make sense to me and what I'm drawn to as far as, the
Right,
scent and everything. So,
right.
um, so that's very cool. And then, are there any other than the fennel and the peppermint for the hot flashes that would be
Yes.
similar?
Yeah. So clary sage is
Oh,
fabulous.
mm-hmm,
Yeah, clary sage is fabulous. Cypress is a good one.
mm-hmm,
Um, the grapefruit is surprises a lot of people,
mm-hmm,
but grapefruit is another really, really um, and it's just an excellent oil for the hot flashes.
mm-hmm,
Sometimes I will use sage. I'm very careful about that though,
mm-hmm,
um, because sage is a neurotoxin. You're not supposed to use it above like above 0.4%
mm-hmm,
when you apply it to the body,
mm-hmm.
um, and it's estrogenic. So there can be zero, like not even your third cousin. Like I don't want anybody having, like breast cancer in your family.
Mm, right.
And if they do, you're not getting the sage.
Mm-hmm. So are these all these oils we've talked about, are these all applied and not diffused? Like, so they're put on the
For most,
body?
for most, for a lot of for the more physical symptoms, we're
Mm-hmm.
going to be applying them to the body.
Okay.
Um, Low libido, they could be diffused, um, although possibly applied to the body,
Mm-hmm.
um, depending what's going on, um, and depending on like people's preferences. Some people are just like, oh my God, I hate the thing going all the time. I don't like the diffuser going all the time. Or I hate cleaning the diffuser.
Mm-hmm.
Um, any warm, fuzzy feelings you might develop are going to go away when you have to clean the diffuser. you know, so it might work the first time, and then you go to use it the second time, and you start thinking, oh, I'm going to have to clean this diffuser afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
And so then be like, okay, application is what we need to do for you.
Is there a specific place that we apply, or does it depend on our symptoms?
It depends on the symptoms,
Okay.
really. For some people, like if somebody has, you know, if they're having just a raging PMS and it always hits the same time in the cycle and
Hmm.
they're regular, um, we're going to start applying it over the ovaries. You're going to apply it for about a week prior to when you normally get your symptoms in that lower abdominal upper pelvic area.
Hmm.
The skin's a little thinner there. It gets absorbed a little faster. Um, you don't really have to apply it right over the ovaries because it gets into the bloodstream anyway. I mean,
Hmm.
that's how absorption works. Um, but there's a psychological component to applying it to that area, and that helps.
Hmm.
I mean, every little thing helps. And
Hmm.
so we apply it over the ovaries because we like to. We feel like it's going to do us a little more good, and because we feel like it will, it does.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Like you said at the beginning, some of it is how are we feeling and what are we thinking and how is it? Because that really matters. Our mindset can really make or break some of these things to
Mm-hmm.
help us out for sure.
Right. Right.
So you said that you usually um, just do a couple of symptoms at a time because you don't want to turn it into a big old essential oil soup.
Right.
Are there symptoms that you either work better together or, putting the oils together for, or are there symptoms that maybe are not the best to put together? You know what I'm saying? For like doing
I,
essential oil type work?
yeah, I understand. There don't seem to be any that you couldn't work with together
Okay.
because I mean, if you just those two lists I gave you for the common ones for hot flashes and low libido,
Mm-hmm.
you can go through and say, oh, well, look, here's a floral one on the hot flash, and on the low libido, there are several floral ones. So they're
Mm-hmm.
going to blend together really well, and you can use one blend for two things.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Because the more things somebody has to use, the less
Mm-hmm.
likely they're going to use either of them
Oh,
or any of
yeah.
them.
Right. For
Right? So
sure.
you can be like, okay, here's one salve that you put on, and it will address all the things or both the things or whatever. They're more likely to do that rather than, okay, do this one at this time and this one at another time, then diffuse this one and
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And more
put it in there.
complicated
Yep.
doesn't usually, for most people, that doesn't go well.
Right. Exactly.
I know it doesn't for me. If it gets more than a couple of steps, then I'm over it and I'm moving on to the next thing. So, um,
Exactly.
do you mix or do you create your own salves and balms and things, or do you?
I create my own essential oil blends,
Okay.
and then um, I work with them whether I usually do a lotion or an oil
Mm-hmm.
versus a salve. I
Okay.
just don't have the room to make a good salve anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
You just there are so many things you need, and and most people don't care for this for the feeling of a salve because they
Mm-hmm.
can be a little ointmenty, a little greasy feeling on the body.
Yeah.
Um, and so if I mix them in jojoba oil, that's very like our own skin. It gets absorbed in. It doesn't leave a greasy residue. Same thing with
Mm-hmm.
lotion.
Right.
So I tend to just stick to oils and lotions.
Mm. And those are easy to use. Very nice.
Yes, exactly. They're easy to use. Everybody knows what they are, and you don't risk contaminating the whole thing by sticking your fingers in them every time,
There's
and
that.
then they go
Yes.
bad faster.
Yeah. Or you have to keep them in the fridge so they don't melt.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So if somebody wanted to purchase essential oils, what should they be looking for? What should they be careful of? Basically, what are a good essential foundations that they should know?
Okay. Um, the things that you really want to look out for, um, you want to look for marketing and what's on the label. So if the company makes, outlandish claims, our oils cure cancer, you might want to steer clear. And I have heard people say, we have an oil that cures cancer. No, you don't.
Right.
Um, and but so what you're looking for then is on the label. You want it needs to list the common name, so chamomile or
Right.
eucalyptus. But then it also needs to have the Latin or botanical name, which gives the genus and species, because common names are not the same thing the world over. There are
Okay.
different, right? So there are different. Um, some people will call, and I'm drawing a blank now. I can't think of a single one, but there are a lot of common names, and it happens in animals as well as plants.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that people think they know what you're talking about, but it's a completely different genus and species.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so you need the genus and species on there. Eucalyptus is not enough because there are at least 5 that are commonly sold as essential oils, and they all have slightly different methods of working.
Mm-hmm.
So Eucalyptus radiata is really good for upper respiratory stuff, but Eucalyptus dives is really good for lower respiratory, but
Mm.
not good for upper. So you don't want to use radiata if you've got a lower because it's not going to work.
Mm-hmm.
Eucalyptus globulus is the common one that most people are familiar with. Um, and it's kind of, you know, in between the Eucalyptus radiata and dives as far as it'll work on both, just not as well on the upper as the radiata, not as well on the lower as the dives.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, so the naming, you want to know the plant, the origin of the plant, um, where it was grown, um, was it grown at a high altitude, because that will impact the chemistry of the plant.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
if there are any chemotypes or varietals of that, like if you're looking at a whole bunch of essential oils somewhere and not a single one says CT or VAR, which is chemotype or varietal, then you're probably not looking at a really quality brand,
Mm.
because there's almost always you should be finding some that have chemotypes or varietals,
Mm-hmm.
because um, basil, um, you can have basil CT linalool, which is going to be better for some things than just regular basil that doesn't have the extra linalool in it. And you
Mm.
get that from where it was grown, the altitude it was grown at, growing conditions, how much water or not that there was during a year. So place of origin, the plant origin, um, the part of the plant used. Some people, I have seen juniper, and it actually listed, I don't know why, and it said um, twigs, needles, berries. And that's really unusual. That's like the whole plant. And normally you'd get juniper, which would be the needles, and juniper berry, which is the berries, and you don't generally
Right.
use the twigs.
Right.
So it's important to know what part of the plant they used. And then
Sure.
also the method of production. Was it extracted? Was it pressed? Was it solvent extraction?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think, and then also the cultivation method. Was it grown? Was it wild harvested? Is it organic?
Right.
So it's a
So,
lot to have on a label, but those are things that you
yeah.
actually really, once you start getting into the oils, you start
Mm.
understanding why you need to know those things.
Okay. Okay. And I'm assuming that they should probably, somebody who's looking at some of these things for specific situations,
Mhm.
in our case, menopausal symptoms,
Right?
should be talking to somebody who has some knowledge about where and what and all, what type of plant to be looking, or what variety or
Right.
type of, I just lost the word, plant that they should be looking at, instead of just saying, oh, hey, this is lavender, I'm going to use this.
Right. And lavender's a really good example. Um, I actually burned myself really badly earlier this year.
Mm,
And everybody says, oh, lavender's great for burns. And it is. But French lavender, I've got three countries of origin of lavender. And I tried all 3 of them on the burn.
Mm-hmm.
And what I found is that the French lavender worked the best on it.
Hmm.
Um, and so I started doing some research, digging into it a little more on the lavender part of things. And I've got some Kashmiri lavender that I have up by my bed. I found that the Kashmiri lavender helps me sleep better than any other lavender I've ever used. I've got some Bulgarian, and Bulgarian has a higher linalool content, and it's much more relaxing.
Mm.
And so the Bulgarian is what I use in my massages.
Mm-hmm.
It helps people relax more. The French is what I have in my first aid kit, and the Kashmiri is what I have by my bed to help me sleep,
Mm.
because they all have a slightly different chemical balance.
Right. That's cool.
Yeah.
So there is an article. I don't know if you've seen it yet. I've just started seeing it in the last couple of days going around on Facebook, um, about a dog who has whose owner had been diffusing, um, and it actually had a negative impact on the dog. Fortunately, for that particular dog owner, it hadn't gotten to a critical or permanent damage. They were able to
Mm-hmm.
catch it, but the dog was very listless, didn't really know the owner very well, wasn't acting like itself. So I thought, wow, this is very timely to be talking to you about uh, oils and diffusing and all this other stuff, because that's not something I would have thought of. And I have animals, and I don't diffuse every day, but occasionally do diffuse. And I never in a million years would have put that as a potential problem for one of
Their
my
physiology
pets.
is, yeah, animal physiology, dog physiology, cat physiology is very different to ours.
Mm-hmm.
And so they react differently.
Yeah.
Cats are especially sensitive. Um, and so I don't give advice on like what to use on pets because I haven't studied that.
No,
I'm not going to
no.
be like, oh, tea trees are great vulnerary. It's a great wound healer. Just put it on your pet and,
Mm-hmm.
put a cone on so they don't lick it and it'll be fine. No,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't know whether that's going to help or hurt the animal.
Right.
Um, so pets and children require more research.
Mm-hmm.
Because children, their physiology is not caught up to an adult's physiology. You want to be really like just avoid eucalyptus for like the first year to two.
Mm.
Um, there have been just a couple of years ago, there was a story about a daycare that had been diffusing eucalyptus, and all the kids were like having adverse reactions, and they didn't know what was going on.
Mm.
I don't remember how they figured it out, but it was eventually figured out that they had been diffusing eucalyptus almost nonstop while the kids were there,
Mm.
trying to prevent the spread of germs.
Right.
Because
Right.
well, kids are just germ factories anyway. So
Truth. I have four.
right, so um, when it comes to diffusing, you really want to only be doing it about 30 minutes at a time.
Mm.
Anyway, you don't want to have anything diffusing for long, long periods of time anyway. But with kids and pets, especially, you want special guidance on that. Somebody who knows essential oils for kids or for pets specifically.
Yeah. Yeah. And we'll link that article in the show notes just to have people,
Yeah,
because I did have a list from that particular person's vet about what oils were poisonous to dogs diffused.
right.
And so I think that's very helpful because, like I said, I had no idea that it was even, I never even thought about it being an issue. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, hey, I've diffused a few of those. Now I don't diffuse constantly either. So that's a bonus, but getting some
Right.
weird things here. But anyway, we'll link that article up just so that people can take a look at that. And it was just somebody that happened to have this happen and is passing that information along.
Right.
Um, so one of the questions that I ask every one of my visitors or every one of my
Mm-hmm.
guests, I feel like everybody's a visitor to my house when we do this. But this is one of my favorite questions, and I love the answers that everybody's been giving. So, in your opinion, what are 3 small steps that we can take right now to help us with our menopausal journey?
Shifting our mindset. Um, pausing before reacting to our symptoms, and finding support if you don't already have some.
Mm. That's so
Finding
key.
one good support person.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Or even animal.
Or right?
Because some people just, yeah. But no, I mean, I totally agree with you there because, you know, I can relate to every single one of those. I've had, issues with thinking this is crap and I don't want to do this anymore. But then, what do? You're kind of, you don't really have a
Well, it's
choice.
going to happen whether you want it to or not.
Right.
So
It's how you approach it. And that's part of the reason why I have
right.
this podcast is that I'm dealing with my own, but also seeing how many people struggle with that aspect of um,
Right.
this change. And, having that support person is just so, so important, whether it's a partner, whether it's a friend, I think is just absolutely key. And to have
Right.
that half a second of pausing before that, I'm still working on.
Oh, I didn't say any of these were easy.
Yeah,
I didn't say none of this was easy.
Right. I know. I'm like constantly finding myself, and I even had this conversation. One of the episodes, part of this is my husband and I sit down and have conversations about
Mm-hmm.
how we're dealing with this. And I think I talked in one of them that's coming up that there are times that I'm literally in the back of my head telling myself to knock it off, that I'm behaving badly or this is ridiculous. And at the same time, I'm arguing with him and I can't seem to stop it. It's just crazy.
Right.
Fortunately, he's understanding and he's one to take a step back most of the time. So
Mm-hmm.
that's very helpful. But it's really key to have that support and have somebody who's at least willing to try to help
Right.
understand and keep you from going completely off the deep end. So
Yeah, because it's too easy to go off the deep end.
I know, and it's really easy to follow that train, and I think that's the challenge that a lot of us run into, I think, is that it's
Mm-hmm.
just so easy to just get all wound and worked up and then not not stop and reflect and realize maybe that it's not everyone else that part of this, I mean, I don't want to blame or say that it's our fault, but we are part of the issue, and we have to acknowledge where that's part of the problem, and we have to try to, in my opinion, we have to try to kind of back it up.
Right. And all of the coping mechanisms that we learn, all of the remedies we may even have in our homes to deal
Mm,
with our symptoms,
mm,
if we don't take a second to pause when we're like starting to go a little cray cray or,
mhm.
sweating some buckets or whatever, you'll forget that you even have those tools at your disposal.
Right. Oh
Um,
yeah.
I've been called, my husband has called me out a few times. He's like,
Hmm.
have you used whatever? And I'm like, oh, forgot. Thank you. Be right back.
Be right back. Exactly.
Excuse me a second.
Hold that thought. Better yet, don't
Right?
hold that thought. Let's just
Right?
forget this all happened.
Exactly. Tell you what, I'll go get that and you go get me some chocolate and we'll meet back here in the middle. And
Yeah,
we'll
it'll
and
be
I'll be
good.
and we'll both be happy because I'll be happy.
Life will be better again.
Right?
Oh my gosh. Well, Michelle, it's been a lot of fun. I really enjoyed having you here and learning more about, just what we can do with something as I guess, simple as aromatherapy, but it's really not that simple. But um, it's like,
Right.
but I think that you've got some great information that you shared with us, and I think that's really helpful to get us started on this road of treating some of these symptoms in a way that that might be helpful to us. And so, if somebody was looking to find out more information, where would they find you?
They will find me at newuhealing.com, and
Okay.
that's NEWYEW, like the tree.
Okay.
So newuhealing.com. And they can also find me on Facebook at New You Transformational Massage. They can find me at Instagram at New You Healing.
Okay, wonderful. And we'll have all those linked in the show notes as well, so everybody can just click and find you easier. And I just want to thank you again. Thank you so much for being here, and I really appreciate everything and all the information you provided to us.
Oh, sure. Thank you for having me.
You are welcome. And everyone, we will see you next week.